The cameras were already rolling when it happened. Bright lights, a restless audience, the low hum of chatter filling the air. Kash Patel leaned into his microphone, confident as ever, the corners of his mouth tugged into a self-assured grin. His words dripped with the kind of arrogance that had become his trademark, dismissive, condescending, calculated to belittle rather than persuade. The room seemed to bend toward him, waiting for the response, daring anyone to challenge his certainty. And then came Jasmine Crockett. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pound the podium. She didn't need to. With surgical precision, she delivered the line that would ricochet across the country in seconds, a comeback so sharp it cut through the air like glass shattering. The crowd heard it, gasped, and for a moment the entire stage froze. Patel's smirk faltered, his jaw stiffening as the weight of her words landed squarely on him. There was no mistaking what had just happened. Crockett hadn't merely replied. She had flipped his own arrogance against him. The audience shifted, some erupting in nervous laughter, others breaking into applause before catching themselves, as if they had just witnessed something too dangerous, too raw, to fully cheer. The moderator blinked rapidly, glancing between them, realizing he was no longer moderating a debate, but standing inside a moment that would be replayed, dissected, and remembered. Patel froze, his silence louder than any argument he might have mustered. Cameras zoomed in on his face, the crack in his composure impossible to miss. Crockett held her gaze steady, not gloating, not overplaying, but radiating the confidence of someone who knew the truth needed no embellishment. And in that suspended second, the balance of the room shifted. The audience knew it. The country watching at home knew it. Patel had spoken with arrogance. Crockett had answered with fire and dignity. What she said next changed the entire debate. The air was charged, every second stretching longer than the last. The studio lights bore down like judgment itself, making the tension almost unbearable. A line had been crossed, and everyone in the room knew it. But this wasn't just another heated debate. It was something much bigger. This was identity on trial. This was respect versus arrogance, dignity versus dismissal. This was a moment that would echo beyond those walls, because in America's polarized climate, a clash like this carried more than words. It carried meaning. As the silence stretched, the cameras did their work. They zoomed in close, Patel's lips pressed tight, his bravado faltering, Crockett's eyes unflinching, steady, calm. Millions were watching live, but millions more would soon watch the replay, dissecting every second, every pause, every flicker of expression. The stakes were no longer about who won the debate. They were about who embodied the truth of America's values in that instant. Crockett wasn't just defending herself. She was standing for every woman who had ever been interrupted, every immigrant who had been told they didn't belong, every citizen dismissed as unworthy. Patel's arrogance had made this personal, but her dignity was about to make it universal. The awkward shuffling in the audience revealed it all. Some squirmed, uncomfortable with what Patel had unleashed. Others leaned forward, eager to see what would come next. The moderator fidgeted nervously, sensing that control had already slipped away from him. Reporters in the front row scribbled furiously, knowing a headline was writing itself right before their eyes. Because what Kash Patel chose to say, or not say, in that silence would echo far beyond these walls. Would he double down, exposing his arrogance further? Or would he retreat, letting Crockett's words stand unchallenged? Either way, the stakes were climbing by the second. And the next exchange would become the clip everyone was talking about. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand the man at its center. Kash Patel had long built his reputation on sharp elbows and sharper words. Once praised for his strategic mind within the corridors of power, he had quickly become known less for his service and more for his swagger. Headlines trailed him, controversial statements, combative interviews, a pattern of turning every platform into a stage for arrogance. In past debates, his tactic was always the same: overwhelm, interrupt, dominate. It wasn't about clarity, it was about control. He thrived in the chaos of noise, mistaking volume for victory. And for a time it worked. Audiences remembered the smirk, the dismissive gestures, the sound bites designed to sting rather than persuade. But beneath that surface confidence was a contradiction. His service record told the story of a man entrusted with national security, someone who once claimed the mantle of patriotism and responsibility. Yet his public persona betrayed those very values. Respect gave way to ambition. Dialogue gave way to insult. In pursuit of headlines, he traded statesmanship for spectacle. Critics noted the pattern. For Patel, ambition always outweighed respect, and insults always took precedence over truth. His rise had been built not on building bridges, but on burning them. Arrogance had become his armor, but also his cage. Each encounter was another performance where he believed he could not lose, because in his mind, losing was simply not an option. That night, however, arrogance collided with an opponent who would not be rattled. Crockett didn't play his game, and in refusing, she exposed him. The very tactics that once fueled his rise now revealed his weakness, a dependence on dominance that crumbled the moment it failed. He thought he had landed the final blow, but he underestimated his opponent. Jasmine Crockett's path to that stage was anything but easy. Long before she delivered her savage comeback, she had built her life on resilience, intellect, and the fire of someone who refused to be silenced. Raised in a family that valued education and justice, Crockett learned early that her voice mattered, even when others tried to convince her otherwise. Her legal background sharpened her instincts. In the courtroom, she had faced down dismissive colleagues, hostile judges, and stacked odds. Each case forged her resolve, teaching her that power isn't given, it's claimed. Her reputation grew not because she played politics the way others did, but because she refused to back down when it mattered most. She became known for sharp comebacks, not as theatrics, but as weapons of truth. Yet she was often underestimated. Critics dismissed her as too blunt, too direct, too unapologetic. They mistook her fire for recklessness, her clarity for inexperience. But Crockett wore those criticisms as armor, knowing that underestimation was her greatest advantage. Time and again, she proved people wrong by standing firm, wielding both intellect and passion with surgical precision. Her identity was central to her journey. As a Black woman in politics, she carried the weight of history and the burden of stereotypes. She knew what it meant to be interrupted, dismissed, and doubted. But she also knew the power of showing up, unflinching, in spaces that weren't designed for her, and reshaping them with her presence. Each challenge only deepened her resilience. Each setback only sharpened her resolve. And so, when she stepped onto that debate stage opposite Patel, she carried more than her own story. She carried the resilience of every person told to sit down, the pride of every underdog underestimated, and the clarity of someone who knew that respect was not negotiable. She was prepared, not just to debate, but to redefine what strength looked like. And that life experience armed her with the perfect words. The room seemed to hold its breath after Crockett's opening strike, but Patel was not about to surrender the stage. His instinct was always to dominate, to push forward even when the ground beneath him had started to crumble. He leaned into his microphone, his voice rising with a sharp edge, and began to interrupt. "That's not serious policy," he snapped, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting away an annoyance. "This is why people don't take you seriously." The words carried the same arrogance that had defined his career. Cutting, condescending, intended to belittle rather than debate. He spoke over her, piling interruption on interruption, each one sharper than the last. "You don't understand how the system works," he continued, smirking as if he were educating a student rather than engaging an equal. "You're out of your depth here." But Crockett didn't bite. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't snap back. Instead, she let the pauses do the work for her. Every time Patel tried to talk over her, she stopped, folded her hands, and waited. The silence wasn't retreat, it was pressure. Each pause sharpened the tension, each moment of restraint making Patel's interruptions sound more desperate, more erratic. The audience began to notice. The murmurs started softly, shuffling feet, whispers between rows. But soon they grew louder, carrying the energy of a crowd beginning to shift its allegiance. Some leaned forward, nodding at Crockett's calmness. Others shook their heads at Patel's tone, the arrogance increasingly hard to ignore. The split in the room that had once favored his bravado now leaned toward her composure. The cameras captured everything. Patel's interruptions, his smirks, his attempts to dismiss her, all magnified in high definition. Side by side with Crockett's stillness, the contrast was unmistakable. He was the agitator. She was the anchor. He relied on Loom. She relied on presence, and presence, in that moment, was winning. The moderator tried to interject, urging Patel to let Crockett finish, but Patel plowed ahead. "You think witty one-liners are leadership?" he sneered, glancing at the audience for affirmation. "America needs strength, not sarcasm." Yet his words, meant to draw laughter, only met awkward silence. A few claps rose in scattered support, but they fizzled quickly. The audience was no longer laughing with him. They were watching him unravel. Crockett, unbothered, finally leaned into her microphone, her voice calm and steady. "Are you finished?" she asked, not with anger but with composure so sharp it cut deeper than any insult. The room reacted with a ripple of gasps and knowing laughter. Patel blinked, caught off guard, the first crack in his confidence visible. It was becoming clear that the more he talked, the smaller he appeared, while the more she held her ground, the larger she became. Every second Patel spent trying to belittle her only underscored the imbalance. Crockett didn't need to overpower him. She needed only to let his arrogance collapse under its own weight. The murmurs in the audience grew stronger now. Heads nodded. A few claps turned into sustained applause, quickly hushed by the moderator, but impossible to ignore. The momentum was shifting, and Patel could feel it. His interruptions slowed, his smirk faltered. His tone grew sharper but less convincing. He had thrown everything he had, volume, dismissal, arrogance, and none of it seemed to land. Crockett sat back, calm as ever, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. She knew the room was hers now. Patel might not have realized it yet, but the audience did. The viewers at home did. And soon, Patel himself would know it too. The debate had begun as his performance to control. Now it was her stage to own. And then came the comes, back no one saw coming. The silence after Patel's last interruption was heavy, stretched taut, like a wire ready to snap. All eyes were on Jasmine Crockett. She leaned ever so slightly toward the microphone, her expression calm, her voice low but steady. The room stilled further, as if the audience itself leaned closer to hear. "You keep talking about strength," she began, her words deliberate, every syllable measured. "But strength isn't interrupting people. Strength isn't arrogance. Strength is respect, and that," she paused, letting the silence hang, "is something you've never learned." The gasp rippled instantly through the room, a low chorus of shock. The audience turned, waiting for Patel's reaction, but Crockett wasn't finished. She let her words breathe like a seasoned attorney in the courtroom, each pause an indictment, each sentence a strike of the gavel. "You say I don't understand how the system works," she continued, her gaze locking on Patel with unflinching steadiness. "But let me remind you, I built my career fighting inside that very system. I fought for people the system tried to silence. I fought for people you wouldn't even bother to look in the eye. And every time you try to talk over me, you're not just disrespecting me, you're disrespecting them too." The audience erupted in applause. Some stood, clapping loudly, as if they could no longer contain themselves. The moderator raised his hand, urging quiet, but the momentum had shifted, Crockett had seized control, and the crowd knew it. Patel tried to interject, but Crockett's composure was immovable. She raised her hand slightly, silencing him without ever raising her voice. "No, you've had your turn," she said coolly. "Now listen for once." The words landed like a hammer. Patel leaned back in his chair, visibly rattled, his trademark smirk dissolving into a clenched jaw. Cameras zoomed in to catch every twitch of his discomfort, every flicker of insecurity crossing his face. Crockett pressed forward. "You tell me I'm out of my depth? That's rich, coming from someone who spent his career hiding behind titles while belittling the very people who keep this country alive. Teachers, nurses, veterans, immigrants, people like my family, people like the ones you'd rather dismiss as insignificant." Another round of applause thundered through the hall, louder this time, breaking the thin veneer of formality. The crowd wasn't just reacting, they were with her, step by step, line by line. Patel shuffled his notes, fumbling for something, anything, that could stop the bleeding. But Crockett was relentless, her delivery sharper than any rebuttal he could craft. "You want to talk about strength?" she continued, her tone rising now, strong and clear. "Strength is coming from nothing and building something with your own two hands. Strength is standing on this stage, being interrupted over and over again, and still holding your ground. Strength is serving your community, serving your country, without arrogance and without insult. That's strength. That's America." The hall erupted. Cheers, whistles, applause, laughter, an outpouring of validation that washed over the room like a wave. Some in the audience stood on their chairs. Others chanted her name. The moderator tried again to restore order, but by then, the moment had already transcended the debate. Patel's face told the story. He opened his mouth to speak but closed it again, shaking his head, papers trembling slightly in his hands. For once, the words that usually came so easily deserted him. He looked not like the confident debater he fancied himself, but like a man exposed, stripped of the armor of arrogance. Crockett leaned back in her chair, her point delivered, her presence commanding. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile broadly. Why? She simply let the applause carry her message further than words ever could. And when the noise finally subsided, she delivered the finishing blow. "You told me I'm out of my depth," she said quietly, almost gently, but with a steel edge. "But judging from the way you're sinking right now, it seems like you're the one who can't swim." The crowd exploded again, this time louder than ever before. The line had landed, sharp and merciless, flipping Patel's arrogance into humiliation. It was the kind of moment that people would remember, replay, and quote for years to come. Patel shook his head, muttering something inaudible into the microphone. But the damage was done. His voice, once sharp and commanding, was drowned out by the roar of the crowd. He tried to recover, tried to cut in, but each attempt only made him appear smaller, weaker, more desperate. Meanwhile, Crockett sat unshaken, her posture regal, her presence magnetic. It was courtroom drama played out on live television, and she was the star witness, the closing attorney, and the judge all at once. Outside the hall, the moment had already gone viral. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Hashtag Crockett clapback, hashtag mic drop moment, hash respect over arrogance. Clips of her comeback flooded feeds within minutes, edited with captions, reaction memes, and celebratory GIFs. TikTok users stitched the footage with commentary. Some replaying Patel's frozen expression in slow motion, others cheering as if watching their own personal victory. Celebrities chimed in almost instantly. A musician tweeted, "This is how you handle arrogance, with dignity and truth." Jasmine Crockett, take a bow. A decorated veteran wrote, "She spoke for all of us who've been talked over and disrespected. That's the America I fought for." Even political opponents, reluctant to praise, admitted privately that Patel had been outmatched in spectacular fashion. The ripple effect was unstoppable. News outlets cut their regular programming to replay the moment. Commentators debated its significance, some calling it a defining clash of the year. Others insisting it revealed a deeper hunger in the American public for leaders who stand tall against arrogance. And Patel? He sat beneath the lights, his reputation unraveling in real time. What he had intended as dominance had become disaster. His silence, his stammering attempts to recover, his shrinking posture, every second was immortalized in high definition, broadcast across the nation. Crockett had delivered more than a comeback. She had delivered a mic drop moment that redefined the entire debate. She had shown that strength isn't measured in arrogance, but in dignity, and in doing so, she had flipped the narrative on its head. The audience inside the hall rose once more, their applause echoing like thunder. For Patel, it was the sound of defeat. For Crockett, it was validation, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated, interrupted, or dismissed. The night was no longer his, it belonged to her. And as the hashtags continued to climb, one truth was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had just made history. By the time the debate ended, the story had already slipped free from the studio walls and into the bloodstream of the nation. News outlets moved with dizzying speed, breaking into regular coverage with bold, lower thirds that screamed across screens. Crockett's savage clapback dominates debate. Cable anchors replayed the clip in slow motion, stopping mid-sentence to dissect Patel's stunned silence, then rolling the tape again as if to savor the precise moment the balance of power shifted. Online, the reaction was even more explosive. Twitter timelines lit up like fireworks, each tweet sharper than the last. Hashtags surged into the trending list. Crockett clapback. Respect over arrogance. Mic drop moment. Within hours, the exchange had been viewed millions of times, spliced into TikToks, remixed with dramatic music, edited into memes that spread like wildfire. One viral edit showed Patel's frozen face with the caption, "Loading response not found." Another paired Crockett's line about strength with clips of historic civil rights speeches, transforming her words into part of a larger, timeless tradition of truth confronting power. Late-night comedians wasted no time. One replayed Patel's flustered silence, then quipped, "That wasn't a pause. That was his career buffering." The audience roared, laughter carrying the weight of shared recognition. Another host staged a mock debate with an actor playing Patel, only to have him silenced by Crockett's words on a loop. What was comedy for them was catharsis for viewers, a chance to laugh at arrogance toppled in real time. But the validation went far beyond jokes. Veterans weighed in, their voices carrying authority rooted in sacrifice. One retired officer tweeted, "Strength is service, not swagger." Crockett showed what leadership looks like. Immigrant families shared their pride, parents telling their children, "See, that is why we never let anyone talk us down." Civil rights leaders echoed the sentiment, praising her as a reminder that respect and dignity can still pierce through the noise of division. Celebrities added their weight to the swell. A Grammy-winning singer posted a clip with the caption, "This is why I love live TV, truth can't be scripted." A best-selling author called Crockett's words the clapback America needed. Activists celebrated, framing the moment as proof that arrogance and dismissal would not go unchallenged in the public square. Even athletes joined in, quoting her line about strength after victories on the field, weaving her words into a cultural fabric far beyond politics. For Patel, the fallout was brutal. Editorials described him as flattened, unprepared, exposed by his own arrogance. Supporters scrambled to spin the moment, but the footage was unforgiving, immortalized in endless loops that played across every screen. Each attempt to recover only drew more attention to the fact that his confidence had cracked in front of millions. Meanwhile, Crockett's star seemed to rise by the hour. Commentators praised her composure, her precision, her refusal to be rattled. Some called her the breakout figure of the debate. Others suggested her comeback would be studied in political communication courses for years to come. For her supporters, the moment was more than performance. It was proof that dignity, when held firm, could not only survive arrogance but dismantle it in full public view. The ripple effect was everywhere. In schools, teachers replayed the clip to discuss respect in civic life. In churches, sermons referenced the exchange as an example of truth-humbling pride. In family living rooms, children repeated her words with pride, while parents nodded, seeing in her strength the validation of their own struggles. By sunrise, the debate moment had outgrown the debate itself. It had become a cultural touchstone, a shorthand for standing tall when dismissed, for responding to arrogance not with anger but with unshakable clarity. Crockett had done more than silence Patel. She had given millions of people a line they could claim as their own. But beneath the noise, the headlines, the hashtags, and the applause, something deeper was stirring. The viral moment had set the stage, but its true impact was not just in the laughter it provoked or the humiliation it dealt. It was in what it revealed about the hunger of the American people, for leaders who embody dignity over ego, for voices that refuse to be drowned out, for reminders of what respect really means. And as the nation replayed the moment again and again, one thing became clear. The story wasn't finished, but the true meaning of that moment would come later. Jasmine Crockett stunned Kash Patel, but her words spoke for millions. What began as a clash on live television became something far greater, a defining reminder that dignity will always outshine arrogance, and that truth, spoken with clarity, carries further than any insult. This wasn't just a debate moment. It was validation for every person who has ever been interrupted, dismissed, or underestimated. It was proof that strength doesn't come from volume or arrogance. It comes from composure, conviction, and the courage to stand tall. Crockett didn't just silence Patel, she gave voice to millions who saw themselves in her, who recognized their own struggles in her calm defiance and her unwavering belief in respect. And that's why Liberty Files exists. Our mission is to spotlight these moments, the clashes, the comebacks, the showdowns, that reveal what America is truly about. Here, dignity beats arrogance, truth beats dismissal, and justice beats hate. So, if you believe in stories that inspire, in debates that expose arrogance, and in voices that cannot be silenced, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to Liberty Files. Share this video with those who need to be reminded that respect is still powerful and that the fight for dignity belongs to us all. Join the growing movement of viewers who know that politics isn't just about policies. It's about people, character, and the courage to speak truth to power. Because in the end, liberty is the file that never closes.